It is Truthscript Tuesday, and I am your host, John Harris. We're going to talk about a few articles on the Truthscript website, and all three of them are really good. I just was refreshing my memory and my knowledge of them before getting started today, and I thought, man, we really do have some good writers at Truthscript that have stepped up and shown themselves to be assets to the church. Their services are very much appreciated, and we're getting new writers every day. I just saw someone actually submit an article a few days ago that I thought, man, this is sharp, and it hasn't been published yet. But maybe next week we'll talk about it. But we're going to get started. I'm going to do the articles, and then we'll talk about some announcements and reminders and so forth at the end. Let's just dive right in. We have first an article from Diane Warner. She's written a number of articles for us now, and all of them very, very good articles. This one is titled, "What Does It Mean to Be Perfect and Complete?" Have you ever wondered that? I know that's something that I've wondered about more than once, and I've led studies in the book of James and so forth. James 1:2-4 says, "My brethren, count it all joy when you fall into various trials, knowing that the testing of your faith produces patience. But let patience have its perfect work, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking nothing." And that it seems like such a high bar. And she talks about this and how it does seem that way. This is not self-help in the way that we most often associate self-improvement, self-help, self-care. These are all terms that are floating around out there. This is not quite the same thing as that. In fact, it's very different than that. And one of the things that's different is that it really is a description of an internal change at a very fundamental level. So she talks about how James starts with counting it all joy, counting everything joy. And not saying that we should be happy with pain necessarily, but that there should be a response that we have towards the things in our life, knowing something about those things, knowing something that many people don't know about those things, knowing that there's a purpose behind those things because there's a God behind those things. And it says in verses 5-8, "If any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask of God, who gives to all liberally and without reproach, and it will be given. But let him ask in faith with no doubt, for he who doubts is like a wave of the sea, driven and tossed by the wind. For let not that man suppose that he will receive anything from the Lord, who is a man who is double-minded, unstable in all his ways." Among the challenges of the Christian walk, she says, is that there is much we don't understand, but there are many decisions that are hard to make. God tells us that when we ask him for wisdom, the wisdom that we lack in our own finiteness, he will give it to us liberally and without reproach. But we must be very serious about accepting this wisdom and adjusting our lives accordingly. So there's promises in the book of James that enable us to count it all joy, that enable us to pursue this perfection he talks about. And it does start with an attitude. It's not something that you can muster up like going to the gym necessarily. It's not something that you internally just kind of grit your teeth and make happen. She talks about our attitude towards wealth. She quotes from verses 9-11, "Let the lowly brother glory in his exaltation, but the rich in his humiliation, because as a flower of the field he will pass away. For no sooner has the sun risen with a burning heat than it withers the grass, its flower falls, and its beautiful appearance perishes. So the rich man will also fade away in his pursuits." And this is so revolutionary if you think about it, because through all of human history, what do people most associate, at least situatedness, conditions, environment? What do they associate with being happy, being fulfilled, being perfect? Even if you, at least as close as you can get, having no worries, right? It's being rich, or it's having security, because it's not necessarily the wealth, it's what the wealth brings with it. The wealth brings with it security. The wealth brings with it medical care and food and shelter and clothing and everything that you would need, plus the extras, right? The things that we consider pleasurable. And the Bible teaches that actually the rich people they're not only are they going the same way that everyone else is going, they're going to end the same way. There's going to be a grave with their name on it, or maybe not even that, but that the rich man will fade away in his pursuits. That, in other words, he's pursuing these things. And as he's pursuing them, as he's wanting this happiness, that's when it will be taken from him. So what point is there to pursuing those as an end in and of itself? So we need to be wise about this. Our attitude towards wealth, endurance, she quotes from verses 12 through 15, which talk about temptation and trials and enduring through those things. And we can only endure, she says, that is, make it through temptation without falling for it, when our desire for God becomes stronger than our desire for the thing that would entice us. And, I would just add to this, our desire for God and the things that he's given us too, that are properly ordered to complement and be the receptacles of our love. The duties and the obligations and the things that God has wired into us, that he's designed for us to do, those things should channel and direct our energies and our love. And so living according to God's standards and in his ordering actually makes for a more satisfying life. And temptations don't have the same kind of appeal when not only you're living that way, but that that's actually the way you're supposed to be living, that the grass truly is not greener on the other side, that actually you can see it for what it is, that the temptations are an ash heap. She talks about do not be deceived. So these are all these imperatives, right, that are in the book of James, just in that first chapter. And then she finally gets to 19 through 21, verses 19 through 21. My beloved brethren, let every man be swift to hear, slow to speak, slow to wrath, for the wrath of man does not produce the righteousness of God. Therefore, lay aside all filthiness and overflow of wickedness, and receive with meekness the implanted word, which is able to save your souls. And that's key. Receive. This is a passive thing in a way. Like we're commanded to do it, but it's not something that we muster up from within ourselves. We actually need something external, and that's the implanted word. And this is what is able to save your soul. So although this seems just like another series of to-dos, James is actually, she says, beginning to describe the picture of God's part in our perfection. Because the testing of our faith has taught us patience, because our understanding is made clear by God's wisdom, because we now are able to elevate our lives from his perspective, because we have learned to endure temptations and to reject lies. So then we are able to be swift to hear, slow to speak, slow to become angry. So then we will lay aside filthiness and wickedness. So then we will receive with meekness the redemptive words of God. And she goes on, talks about how this perfection is God's. He is the source of this. And really great article on sanctification. This is what she's talking about. It's sanctification. And what you see, the common thread through all of this, is a total reliance on God, an understanding of who he is, how he controls your life, and then relying on him, trusting in him, having faith in him, that even when you're in a trial that doesn't quite make sense, you know that behind it is a loving God who has your best interest in mind. That's hard sometimes. It really is. I mean, I've been through what I think are trials, and then I sometimes talk to other people and realize, wow, what I'm going through is nothing compared to what they've gone through. And yet I've seen Christians strong in their faith who have endured these things, who can count everything joy in their lives. The response to their situations is a joyful response. And they truly are, they have a glow about them. There is this perfection that they have attained to. And of course, that this perfection meaning that there's a maturity, that there's a completeness, that there's an adult inside them that is able to handle things, not an insecure child. And so many people today are running around in adult bodies as insecure children because they haven't learned these things. And they go through circumstances where they should, but they don't have the faith and the proper perspective that faith brings you in those things. And that may be one of the common threads here, because the next article is 3 rules for treating Christian co-belligerents amid theological difference. And when I read this, I just thought, this is really just about being an adult. And it was a challenge to me. And I was checking myself, and if I had to grade myself on this, I would probably give myself maybe a B. I don't know where, plus or minus, but I'd probably give myself a B. Now, that's hopefully me being accurate, but I would challenge you, especially if you're involved in social media and specifically X, if you're on that platform and you're involved in a lot of political fights, this is a really good article to read, because it does challenge, I think, so much of what I see on that platform. And he gives some examples, and this is a really well written article by Matt, and it's Matt is just such a great guy. He came out to the retreat. He flew all the way from Georgia up to Wisconsin to come and to the Truthscript conference that we had last week. And anyway, I got to connect with him. He's a really great guy. But he wrote this. He talked about the fundamentalist modernist controversy, and talked about he's a knowledge of the history of this. He talks about how what happened was there were dividing lines that formed in the group of people who were separating from the modernists being the more heretical branch of Christianity, if you want to call it that. Of course, Machen made the case it really wasn't Christianity. And then they separated, and then they formed internal conflicts. And over time, and he warns about this, and this, he thinks kind of made room for what we saw in the 1970s with sort of a reemergence, a reinvigoration in evangelical circles of social justice stuff. And we're, of course, in the last 10 years, we've really seen this hit home hard. And he gives some examples. He talks about the example of Barnabas, how there was a disagreement between Paul and Barnabas was sent to Antioch to report that the Greeks had come to faith in Christ. And let's see here. He talks about the dispute over John Mark accompanying Paul. They separated, which meant Barnabas did not capitulate. However, it is implied, Matt writes, they did eventually resolve their conflict as Paul later deems John Mark useful in his ministry. Barnabas was also one of the men in Galatians with Peter who was led astray by Jewish favoritism. Paul had to rebuke Peter in the presence of all. So what we find in this is that both Paul and Barnabas, despite their differences, worked as a team and encouraged each other in the ministry. And Barnabas thought the best of Paul, risked his own reputation to bring Paul into the fold. However, they also were willing to disagree strongly when when it was necessary for the advancement of the kingdom. And they just went their separate ways. And there's times to do that. Now, there are times, especially when you have actual heresy, when you have real issues, when you have character concerns that are, legitimate, fundamental pattern of character problems. You need to warn others. I mean, we understand that. But what he's talking about here are, the arguments that you see today, arguments over eschatology, there should be arguments, like actual, debate kind of arguments. But when it comes to rejecting someone's entire ministry because of a debate over that, or when it comes to, I'll just speak personally for myself for a moment. The Christian nationalism debate has really made some dividing lines. And from my perspective, where I sit, it's not the quote unquote Christian nationalists who've really caused those, although that would be their assessment. It's been those who have wanted to kind of gatekeep them out of ministries. And a few weeks ago, actually, I was with Matt. It was in Wisconsin. I remember I spoke on liberalism. And one of the examples that I was giving, a negative example, was the perspective that Scott Anil at G3 gives on, and this is, I guess this was at a Truthscript conference. So it was one paragraph, but I just talked about kind of his view of government and thinking that the Pilgrims, in trying to establish a Christian commonwealth, were essentially not in line with God's word, not in line with, what they were unbiblical. And, as I said this, though, I was checking myself because I wanted to make sure that people knew. And so I added, it doesn't mean that other things that you should just reject everything Scott Anil says. It doesn't mean he has doesn't have other good things to say on other issues. I disagree with him on this issue. And not that I'm the standard, I'm not, but this is something that I would hope to see more of, that we could have disagreements, but also when there is someone who's not a heretic, who has taken hard stands, is on your side on so many things, to be able to just recognize that person is, their ministry is still valuable. You can still be co-belligerents. You can still encourage one another. You can still complement each other's ministries, and you don't need to form such rigid lines that they're hopelessly lost and they view you as hopelessly lost, and those kinds of things. So here's his 3 rules. Number one, look for things to encourage. which I just kind of gave an example from my own life. Number two, represent fairly. This is something that I really wish I saw more of, but represent even your opponent in a fair way. Don't try to strawman them. Don't try to misrepresent them. Try to understand what they're saying, and then keep the main thing the main thing. Keep your eye on the goal that Christ will be done in heaven on earth, and that's really, this gets down to the conclusion that whether we have a great awakening or whether things go south, we have the opportunity to guide this generation by modeling Christ likeness and brotherly love. And I think that's a really good reminder for me too. And then the third article is called Book Review Is the Church ProGay by Matthew Peterson. And I get an opportunity now to exercise what Matt just wrote about, because he talked about co-belligerency, and I remembered kind of halfway through this article, I was like, isn't Reverend Mathis, the guy who wrote this article, Sean Mathis, on is the church pro-gay, or he didn't write the article, Matthew Pearson did. There's a lot of Matts and Mathises floating around here, but Sean Mathis is the guy who wrote the book that is being reviewed by Matthew Pearson. And Sean Mathis, I'm pretty sure, I'm like 99% sure he went after me for an article that I wrote at American Reformer. And this was months ago, but it wasn't a big deal to me, but because I didn't really know who he was, but I just remembered that. And I thought, this is a great opportunity because, he disagreed strongly with me. I don't really remember exactly what it was, but yet, in this book, from what Matthew Pearson's saying, he doesn't bang up job. It's a really good book, and Matthew Pearson recommends it. And he's an OPC minister, Sean Mathis. And now, hopefully, I'm right on that, because I said I was 99% sure, but now there's this 1% that's causing me to doubt. I think it's who I'm talking about, but maybe by the end of this, I'll have to look it up. I'll have to be 100% sure. Anyway, Sean Mathis wrote this book, which I commend to you based on this review, that he really gets into normalizing homosexuality, the side B issue, meaning this idea that you can be same-sex attracted but not in sin, and that kind of thing. And he brings a pastoral heart to this whole discussion, because there's people in the church who are taken captive by this kind of theology. And so, Matthew Pearson even says that the book had very few weaknesses. It's concise, it's thoroughly detailed where it needs to be. And so there's really not a whole lot of critiques he has. He has a few little things, but one of the great strengths of the book is the pastoral approach. And it would have been easy to conclude the work with the main thrust of theological and cultural analysis, but Mathis approached the issue not merely as a theologian or sociologist, but as a pastor. So like I said, he brings that understanding. So check that book out. Matthew Pearson reviewed this, and Matthew Pearson's been great, I have to say. I've noticed his online activity, and he's just he does a really good job. So now I got to confirm what I just said, because I let my tongue get ahead of my. Let me see. Let me make sure that this is the same Mathis that I'm thinking of who critiqued me. Let's see. I'm not finding it now. So maybe I should just retract that, because I'm not sure off the top of my head whether or not he critiqued me or not. I seem to remember an article by a guy named Mathis who was taking issue with something I had written a while ago, but now I can't remember it. So whatever. Anyway, check out that book, Is the Church Pro-Gay? And just a reminder to everyone who supports the work of Truthscript, if you like this articles ministry, you can go to truthscript.com. And you can scroll down to the bottom, go to publish. If you want to publish with us, go to donate. If you want to donate to the cause, we would definitely appreciate that. It is 501c3, so there is a tax write-off on that. And I wanted to say that we have been, I know I announced this a few months ago that we're working on building a Church Finder app. And I've had several people ask me about a Church Finder app. And it's, from what I understand, coming along, and it's very close. But I've been, that's something that I've heard now for a little while, that I think the team that's working on this, I think they keep running into little things, and they want it to be right. And we want it to be right when it comes out, and not to be in development as we're rolling it out, which I know what that's like, and it's not fun. So I appreciate everyone's patience with us on that. I actually just sent a message right before this particular podcast. Maybe I have a return now just to find out where we're at on that. And I'm seeing if there's ways that we can speed that up so that you have that tool available and we can populate it with churches that are solid, according to the statement of faith that we have on Truthscript. We're also in the planning stages for a big conference, Lord willing, in 2026. You can pray for that. And there's going to be events next year as well, but we're really trying to think big. And this is one of the things you could definitely help us with. If we could hire someone to, and it's all volunteer right now, but if we could hire someone to really run Truthscript, that would be phenomenal. So I hope that was encouraging to you. I hope those articles were encouraging to you. If you can't do anything else, we really appreciate, and this goes for everyone, sharing the articles on social media. If you liked an article, if you read an article, if you've signed up for a weekly updates and you see one that you like, share it around on social media. Let people know that you've got this article from Truthscript. That is the way that we can compete with organizations like Gospel Coalition that have, they have a lot of money. We'll put it that way. And they've been around for a long time. But we believe that Truthscript needs to be up there. It needs to be in those arenas, and it needs to be a recognizable name. And so we're making progress in that area, but we can use your help as well. So we appreciate all the support and the love. And Pastor Mathis is here saying, thank you for reviewing my book. Now, he's Pastor Mathis, if you're listening, did I get you wrong? Because I was pretty certain that he would critique something I wrote, and then I felt bad. So that I had said that, because I'm thinking it must have been another Mathis now. But anyway, either way, I just, what I found, this is just that my segue into the conclusion here of all the articles that we just went over. What I have found is that maturity, so the people that I respect in the church who demonstrate joy of the Lord, who have a resolute spirit when they go through trials, who can react in joyful ways, who can see the big picture, they are also the same people that tend not to get into dumb fights. And when they do get into disagreements, they're mature, and they know how to do so, but while representing the person fairly and not attacking in just underhanded ways. So I see these articles as kind of flowing together in my mind, and they're really the marks of maturity. And one of the things that I've been listening to a lot of the side B stuff this week from, well, I probably shouldn't give away what I've been listening to, because it's gonna pop up in my other podcast Conversations That Matter, and it might be a little bit of a surprise to some of you. But I've been listening to a lot of teaching. Preston Sprinkle, I'll say his name. I've been listening to a lot of Preston Sprinkle, among others. And one of the things that strikes me about that teaching is not just, I think it's wrong, but also how I think it's just not, I feel like I'm listening to a youth pastor, and it doesn't matter who's supporting it. I feel like it's a youth pastor that I'm listening to. It's someone who is very concerned about the feelings of others, and we should be concerned with how people think and feel, I suppose. But they make that like the goal, that we don't want to hurt people's feelings because people are fragile, and it's like they're kids. They can't handle the truth, and so I get that sense. And there's a just casual approach that's very, very personality driven, and it's you can't sink your teeth into it and get truth. That's my impression. And so theology, your temperament when it comes to trials, your just the way that you act when people disagree with you, all of these things, I think, point to someone who either is going to be mature and godly, or someone who is going to be ungodly and immature. And we should all strive, obviously, for maturity, for perfection, as James talks about. So anyway, good edifying articles at Truthscript this week. God bless. More coming. Bye now.